Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Inshallah, today we will cover the topic of primary data collection. In research, there are two types of data. Number one is primary data, and number two is secondary data. Each of the types of data has its own advantages. So first, we want to ask whether we want to use primary or secondary data. Each has its own advantages. The advantages of primary data is you collect the data yourself, and then you are able to collect the data that will fulfill or meet your objectives. The disadvantage is that it costs you some time and money in order to collect the data yourself. Secondary data has advantages in that it is readily available, it doesn't cost you money. But the disadvantage of secondary data is that sometimes the secondary data doesn't fulfill all your needs. So today we will discuss how to collect primary data. The first type of primary data is observation. So in observation, the researcher gather the information himself or herself, and the researcher is the instrument. So the researcher is the instrument. Therefore, the researcher need to fulfill the requirement of validity and reliability. So when the researcher collects the data using observation, there are certain things that the researcher needs. For example, notebook. Nowadays, the researcher just bring, what do you call, notepad, notebook, laptop, handset sometimes is enough. What the researcher does is observe some events, and there are two types of observation. One is called participant observation, where the researcher will be part of the the researcher is part of what's being observed. For example, suppose the researcher wants to study or to observe the behavior of female operators working in factories. In this case, the researcher has to disguise, and he or she will have to be part of what's being observed. she has to disguise as the female operators. There was one lecturer who uh, who participated and she disguised. She was a lecturer and she disguised as she disguised herself as being the female operators in factories in Penang. So the respondents in that study didn't know that one of them was the researcher. So that is called participant observation. The researcher participates in what is being observed. And in this case, the researcher must disguise himself or herself in order not to influence the behavior of people being observed. Kalau pekerja kilang tu tahu dia researcher, tentulah mereka akan apa ni? Mereka akan ubah behavior. Tentulah dia akan buat perangai yang elok-elok kan. So the other type of observation is non-participant observation, where the researcher doesn't participate in the behavior of what being observed. So in the non-participant observation, the researcher just observe without participating. For example, there was a research who wants to study what attracts customers in a shopping mall. So what the researcher needs to do is just observe. Okay. So these are the type of activities: drink, food, chat how long, and other activity. So the researcher has this kind of sheet or a piece of paper, and he or she just observe. And then this is the map of where the researcher sits. Okay, this is just an example of the map where the researcher will sit and observe the behavior of customers going into the shopping mall. This part is the store for clothes, electronics, books, fast food, sports, news. And the researcher just sit and observe what kind of things the customers buy, what attracts them, what they do. Besides shopping, what they do, maybe they go to fast food and eat and drink, and maybe they chat among themselves how long it takes for them to buy clothes, electronics, books, how long they eat, how long they chat. So that is called non-participant observation. Okay, just to give you an idea of observation. Of course, there are many other types of observation. There was one interesting research done in my village. I live in Bukit Besar, Pondok Pakman, Bukit Besar. There was one researcher from Japan, a lady, a lady student, a lady PhD student. She was still single, and she wanted to study the impact of religious education, what people study in religious school, what types of book they study, who are the teachers, what they do, what time they pray, how they fast, how they perform certain ibadah, what 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 time they read books, and then the impact on the behavior, the impact on the students' behavior. Students here means students of the madrasah or the pondok. And then the impact of the pondok on the surrounding area. How many mosques in the surrounding area, the behavior of people in the surrounding area compared to the behavior of people farther than the surrounding area. She just came and observed. She wore hijab just like Muslimah. She fast during Ramadan, and it took her about 1 year to collect the data. And she went to many ceramah, including ceramah by past leaders, Parti Islam Malaysia. She likes it. And I was her driver, and I was her translator. She didn't speak Malay, she didn't speak English. So sorry, she didn't speak Malay. She spoke English. So she spoke to me in English, and I translated to the respondents. She did observation and also the interview. Okay. Any question? So in that case, she was a non-participant. It was a non-participant observation. She did. She didn't take part in the salah, in the prayer. She didn't take part. She only did the fasting. She tried to fast. Okay.
I still remember that lady when she participated in fasting before, and I went to that school.
Okay, you went to Naldo?
Yes.
Oh, you went.
On that time, I went to Naldo, and she participated in iftar.
Yes.
During Ramadan.
Her name was Hiroko, and now
I still remember that lady.
And now she's Dr. Horia. She reverted to Islam, and then she finished her PhD. Now her name is Dr. Horia. I've lost contact. A very nice lady. I was her driver to drive around. She didn't know about our culture. She asked me to drive at night. I said, no, I cannot drive you at night, only during daytime. She wanted to go to certain religious ceramah in masjid, and I had to translate for her. Okay. Experimentation. The second type is experimentation. Experimentation is the main tool in the research where it's been very successful. The idea about experimentation is to determine the effects of factors on a response variable by varying or changing these factors in a controlled way and often in controlled conditions. So experimentation can be very reliable and efficient means of collecting data and verifying or refuting theories. I've read many uh, research design using experimentation in the field of education, where they test the effects of teachers on performance, for example. They want to determine what are the factors which determine the exam scores for certain subjects. So this is in the field of education. For example, how exam scores are affected by whether students attended lectures or worked from a book, the gender of the students, and if the student had a job. There was one study, interesting study, which include also whether the student had breakfast or not. And the study found out that breakfast was a significant factor influencing the performance of the students. Interesting. So based on the study, the teachers should make the student have breakfast. And the teacher also must have breakfast. Faiza, you also need to have breakfast. So for example, these are the score for the variables. There are um, three factors which affects the performance. One is study style, whether they go to lecture or they study themselves. Two, the gender factor. Three, the working status, whether they are working or they are not working. This is called experimentation. Okay, any question? I'll just go very fast because not many people, I think none of you use experimentation, right? Okay, survey. Survey is what most of you use, I think. So survey could be asking questions face to face or survey using telephone or questionnaires. And questionnaires, there are three types. One is mail questionnaires, when the questionnaires are mailed to the respondents. Two is the researcher himself or herself uh, go to the respondents, distribute the questionnaire, and collect the questionnaire. And the third is nowadays people use what do you call e-questionnaires, where questionnaires are mailed through the um, WhatsApp, email, and other uh, electronic methods. So Surveys dominate most of the research nowadays, especially by students. I don't know why. Most of my students also use a questionnaire. Cikgu Norma, you use questionnaire, right?
Yes, doctor.
Why you use questionnaire? Most students use questionnaire.
Because it's uh, more convenience, or maybe mm,
You like the step-by-step procedure, right? So you have a lot to write when you use questionnaire. And I think it's easier to analyze. Once you distribute the questionnaire, you collect the data, you input into SPSS, and then you can analyze using SPSS or PLS or AMOS or other software. So I think it's convenient in the sense that the survey, you can devise instruments in the questionnaire which will answer your research objectives and research questions directly. So once the data are set, then your research is set, meaning then all you need to do is just input the data and analyze the data, report the findings, and discuss the findings. Right. So it's most convenient, and because there are many theses using questionnaires, therefore you can kind of see how they do it, and you just follow the steps. I myself also use questionnaire because I think because there are what you call precedents. There are previous studies who have successfully employ questionnaire. The problem with secondary data is sometimes there are missing data. Then this is a big problem. Missing means some of the variables you cannot get, or some data on the variables are missing for certain years. For example, you want data from 20 years, for example, from 1990 to, let's say from 2000 to 2019, right? And then suppose there are missing data, then you run into problems. And of course, there are ways to overcome the problem of missing data, but you don't want to face that problem. Okay, next method is interviews. Interviews can be used for quantitative as well as qualitative research. So uh, for qualitative research, the researcher can go and interview the respondents face to face, or using telephone, or nowadays using Skype, Zoom, and other methods. So the advantage of using interviews is that it allows the researcher to obtain uh, a mass of information, because the researcher has the opportunity to ask the respondents directly and follow up the questions. Unlike questionnaire, the researcher doesn't have the opportunity to follow up the respondents. So that's the advantage of using interviews. In the interview, you can start with what we call interview protocol, where you have a set of questions to ask. And the advantage is after asking the questions, there are more questions that you can ask to get a more in-depth data on the respondents. Unlike the questionnaire, the questions are very, you cannot add any more questions. And for example, in your questionnaire, you have 5 constructs. You can only ask about the 5 constructs, right? For example, you have attitude, subjective norm, perceived behavioral control, religiosity, moral obligation. You have 5 constructs. So the questions must focus around those 5 constructs. In the interviews, you are more free to ask questions, and you can ask any questions and get as much information as possible, and later on you analyze the data and make it into constructs. In the interview, you will end up having more information. So, and there is also, you can interview people separately. We call individual interview, and also group interviews, where you interview a group of people, but the group interviews technique has some disadvantages in that there are respondents who are more talkative than others. So some respondents interviewed, they tend to dominate the conversation, while others just tend to keep quiet and just agree on everything that was said by the more dominant respondents in the interview. So that's a disadvantage of group interviews. But in market research, group interviews are used to focus on certain aspects of the marketing strategy. And there is also another technique called focus groups. Focus groups, usually there are two, there can be one group or there can be two contrasting groups. It can be one, it can be two groups which contrast each other. For example, in marketing, one group is the higher level income group, and the other group a lower level income group. So you ask the two groups, and you expect to have different and contrasting answers. The higher income group might give different answer compared to the lower income group. I attended one focus group which was not successful. We tried to examine the perception of Shiite and Sunnis on certain issues. Okay, on Sahaba, on the companions, on Aisha, on certain hadith collections and certain ibadah rituals. But only the Sunnis came. The Shiites didn't come. So, so it didn't turn out to be the focus groups that we want. So it was only one group. We tried to examine the perception, the perspective or the perception of the Sunnis and the Shiites. I don't know why. The Shiites, they they tend to be, uh, they tend to run away from any kinds of research. They were accusing us of uh, trying to criticize the Shiites, while our intention was just to compare the different perspectives of Sunnis and Shiites on certain issues. Okay, and there is a separate chapter, chapter 9, will be discussed more on the interviews. Next method of primary data collection is diary methods. Um, Diary methods, like the name suggests, is just a note on. Um, it's just like a diary or a note, and the diaries can be either qualitative or quantitative, depending on the researcher's intention. Okay, in the simplest form, it's just a simple record of events from which activity sampling may provide a certain numbers. Um, and at another level, diaries may take the form of personal journal research process. Not many people use this kind of method. There are several problems with using the diary methods. Hold on. Okay. Um, so there are several problems using diary methods. Number one, there is a need to select people who can express themselves well there is a need to structure to focus the writer. Maintaining the diary is time consuming. The writer needs continued encouragement. There may be particular anxieties about confidentialities. The respondents might not want to write all they want because they are afraid of the confidentiality. So we do not recommend the use of the diary method because there is a limited study time. Usually the diary method involves considerable time and considerable involvement with the respondents. Okay, just for your knowledge. Case studies are used to study a certain case or a certain phenomena in the particular settings. And the case study method is very common in business research. The only disadvantage is in case studies, the scope is narrow and therefore generalization cannot be made to the general population. So when the researcher use case studies, the case is only valid for that particular case, and a generalization cannot be made. Even if the researcher wants to make a certain generalization about the whole population, the generalization is very difficult to make because of the limitation. However, the case study is a very powerful research method in terms of questioning the accepted theory. So this is called inductive research method. If you remember, in inductive research method, the researcher starts with no theory at all. The researcher goes out and collect the data, analyze the data, and from the data, the researcher can form or come up with his or her own theory. And the theory that is formed using the case studies can be used to confirm or to contradict the existing theory. One difficulty with the case method, with the case studies method, is that ensuring access and continuity to organizations can sometimes be problematic. Because in case studies, researchers typically use a mixed data collection approach, utilizing a combination of observation, surveys, and interviews. So Yin 1994 and Eisenhardt 1989 has a very good book on the case study. Any question on case study? A case study is an in-depth study which explores issues, present and past issues as they affect one or more units. What we mean by units? are organization, group, department, or individuals. One may use a single case study design or multiple case studies, which make for a more comparative approach. The comparative case studies ask the same questions in several related organizations as well as your own. In managerial setting, this is called benchmarking. So in case studies, for example, you want to examine a few organizations, you ask the same questions to the different organizations. And then you try to make comparisons, and one of the organizations is made as benchmark. Okay, the case studies approach actually can gather very, what do you call, rich information. The information is very rich and unique and particular. So that's the advantage of a case study. I did a case study on the determinants of compliance behavior of zakat using observations and interviews, asking lots of questions to the respondents that I chose, who were UNISHAM lecturers. And based on the observation, the interviews, I analyzed the data and I came up with my own theory. And I call it Islamic theory of planned behavior, which contradict the existing theory of planned behavior by Eisen. So the point is, the case study method can be used to compare to contradict or to conform, sama ada untuk menyokong ataupun tidak menyokong teori yang sedia ada. So when I did the case study among UNISHAM lecturers, I found out that attitude did not play significant role. And instead of attitude, the most important and significant determinant was religiosity. So I contradicted Eisen theory. But I'm not famous. I'm supposed to be famous. I'm the first one who contradict Eisen. Okay. I'm not famous. Nobody.
Sure, Doctor, you should be famous. Eh?
Nobody
You
reads.
should be.
No,
That's
no.
what I was thinking. You should be.
Maybe I will do another research and explain the findings further. I publish.
You already famous, Doctor.
Oh,
You
no.
already famous.
I'm famous only among you. Outside of you, nobody knows me. Yeah, I think I want to write another paper based on that and explain why religiosity should be more significant than attitude in the case in studies related to Islam, right? Because theory of planned behavior is based on conventional, and in Islamic approach, attitude is secondary related compared to our religiosity. So I found that in the case of zakat, religiosity played a more significant role compared to attitude. Okay. So in my case studies, the three most important significant were religiosity, subjective norm, and perceived behavioral control. In Eisen, the three most significant variables were attitude, subjective norm, and perceived behavioral control. The only difference was attitude. Um, so I would like to suggest the subsequent research on zakat, waqaf, Islamic banking should use religiosity as one of their most significant variable. Okay. Why we need to use case studies? The purpose of the case studies can be used when it is not possible to adopt a sampling approach that seeks to generalize conclusions as if conditions were identical in other organizations. That is, it's not possible to generalize from a case study, but possible to generalize or test a theory. So in case studies, it's not possible to make a generalization because you only test a small group of respondents. However, you can use your finding to test against the available theory. Okay, whether your findings agree or do not agree with the existing theory. For example, you could test the theory that senior manager involvement leads to increased job satisfaction and productivity amongst lower grades of staff. Often the purpose is to replicate, to compare the organization you are studying with others in a systematic way. So maybe there are other researchers who already did the study and you just replicate and use in a different organization to test whether the organization that you study has different findings or the same findings. You want to compare and contrast. Okay. You cannot make generalization. However, small generalizations can be made about a particular case. Okay. So you can say, for example, there is a link between high involvement practices and organizational performance within the particular organization context that you study. So you cannot make generalization about all other organizations that have not been studied. Okay, now that data storage, you can store your data in spreadsheets. Anyone familiar with Excel, SPSS? Okay, that's the most basic, Excel, SPSS. You store your data in Excel or SPSS, and then if you want to analyze, you can analyze using Excel or using SPSS or more sophisticated ones such as PLS or AMOS. I will, if you're interested in PLS, okay, I will upload video afterwards I think there are about 30 videos, 30 short videos on how to use PLS. I will post it in Telegram. Okay, all the 30 videos after class, so you can practice using PLS SAM. The note about PLS, there are currently the latest version is PLS uh, 3. Now PLS 3, but you need to pay for PLS 3. They give you 1 month trial. Okay. So after 1 month, you can either pay, or if you don't pay, they will discontinue. You cannot use anymore. So that's the advantage of Smart PLS 3. If you don't want to pay, you can download Smart PLS version 2. But I think the problem with Smart PLS version 2 is they allow only 100 respondents. Okay, they allow only 100 respondents to 100 or 200. I think 100 respondents. So that's the problem with Smart PLS version 2. Or you can be smart like me. In order to use Smart PLS 3, I only pay for 1 month. Okay, 1 month it costs, I don't know, I forgot. Very cheap. 1 month, for example, I forgot how much, but very cheap, maybe $30. So you just use when you just pay when you want to use. All right. First you install, and then you can use for 1 month. After that, you don't pay. All right. When you need to use again, then you pay. You can subscribe for 1 month. Okay. So for 1 month, it's not that expensive. Maybe $30, something like that. I forgot. So I pay only when I have the data to analyze. So Smart PLS is, in my opinion, is more friendly than Amos. Previously, I used Amos. I think Amos is more complicated, more strict. The data has to be normal. You need to normalize. You need to satisfy certain assumptions. Blah blah blah. Then you can go and analyze the what do you call the structural equation. In PLS, the data doesn't have to be normal. All right. PLS will fix the non-normality, and it can also fix the multicollinearity problem. So even if you have certain multicollinearity among the constructs, PLS can fix the problem. But if you want to use Amos, you are free to do so. Cikgu Norma, you use Amos or PLS?
Amos.
It's not friendly, but it's free. That's the advantage. It's free, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I used to use Amos, but now I don't remember anymore. Long time ago, I used Amos. I still remember the truck, the lorry that you need that you need to click. So there are many steps. But PLS is more friendly. All right. Any question? Mr. Hamza, it looks like you have question.
No, I don't have any question. I'm following.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been using SPSS, but I would want to try new systems.
Yes. You can use SPSS to store the data. You can key in the data in SPSS and also analyze using certain statistics. For example, you want to test using a regression analysis, and then SPSS is necessary. But if you want a more sophisticated analysis, which is trending nowadays, simultaneous, no, sorry, structural equation modeling, I would suggest you use PLS. Before I forget, we will have e-seminar. This is advertising, yeah? So we take a short break for commercial. So we will have a seminar from 11 to 13 of April, rather, 11 of 13, October. 11 to 13 October, e-conference, International Conference on Contemporary Issues in Islamic Finance, from 11 to 13 of October. I will post it in the WhatsApp group and also in the Telegram. And I would advise everybody to present. You can present whatever you want to present. You can present your problem statement. You can present your literature review. Or if you have a framework, you can present your conceptual paper. It costs only 50 ringgit for local and 80 ringgit for international. Mr. Hamza, you pay only 80 ringgit. You can present using
80 ringgit is $20.
80 ringgit is about less than $20. It's less than $20.
Just less.
I think it's the cheapest seminar in the world.
I pay.
So it's the cheapest one, less than $20. So you will get a certificate, the electronic certificate, and your paper will be published in our proceeding. And if you want to publish in our journal, we have our journal, CGIF. Our journal is Cipher International Journal of Islamic Finance, CGIF, and it costs only 50 ringgit. For everybody, 50 ringgit. So 50 ringgit is about $12. $12. Okay. So Faiza, Cikgu Normal, everybody, please present and please publish with us. Boleh, Cikgu Faiza? Present using video. You just send a video. You make a
Doctor,
video. Yes?
but I'm doing education.
Oh,
The theme is about Islamic economy, Islamic, but I'm doing education.
is there any Islamic issues?
I try to find it.
Education is okay. Try to relate with Islamic. Okay.
I'm doing leadership in education.
Leadership in education. Okay. How to
I try to find it later.
try to find one small connection with Islam. Maybe you put one verse from Quran or one Sunnah or anything. The role of teachers in Islam.
When the due date to send the abstract?
17.
17 September.
Yes, 17 September. And the full paper, 30th of September.
Inshallah.
Just a small paper, 5 to 6 pages is enough.
It means that conceptual paper also came.
Yes, conceptual paper is welcome. Any kind of paper, anything you want to talk about.
Inshallah.
We want to give opportunities to students and lecturers.
Even from others university,
Yes,
like me.
yes. We even from the US, all over the world. We advertise all over the world. So far, yeah. So take this opportunity because you get the certificate and the proceeding and have an opportunity to get published for only 50 ringgit in our journal. So I'm the what they call the chairperson for the e-conference and the chief editor for the journal. So I have a power. So a little power. Although the issues are issues related to Islamic finance, but it's not really restricted to Islamic finance. Anything, any ideas that you can relate, however small, to Islam. So anything. And for PhD students, you are welcome to present your chapter 1. Ms. Hamza, when you're ready, you can present your chapter 1 in the first colloquium, first PhD colloquium. Faiza also, if you are ready, we will have, I think, end of November. The date will be notified later. End of November is the tentative date. Just present your chapter 1. Okay, after you pass your first colloquium, you can go for proposal defense. In proposal defense, you need to present your chapter 1, chapter 2, literature review, and chapter 3, research methodology. Okay. Any question before we go to triangulation? Any question? Okay, let's talk about triangulation. In today's research, there is a need for triangulation. Why we need triangulation? Sometimes one method that we use cannot give us the comprehensive data in order to answer the research objectives and the research questions. So the idea of triangulation is to support the existing data and to provide alternative explanations. So the idea is to collect data by different means, and hopefully we can come up with the same truth or the same finding. Triangulation is used in the qualitative research, and the process of triangulation is quite complex. Because in qualitative research, unlike the quantitative research, there is an involvement of subjectivity. So because of that, sometimes it's a good idea to come up with different data and different technique of gathering data, and hopefully it will support the findings. So in qualitative research, the researchers believe that there are multiple alternative perspectives or different views of the case, and that there is no single way to get the 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 empirical data. So instead of saying that there is one way to get the empirical data, the qualitative researchers, they view that there are many ways to collect the data and to get to the truth. So in qualitative research, efforts to find the validity of data observed go beyond simple repetitive action of data gathering, like in the quantitative research. The principles underlying the choice of data collection techniques are based on two key requirements of qualitative research. Number one, the need to gain full access to the knowledge and meanings of informants, and to achieve plausibility and credibility of the evidence presented and assertions made by the researcher. Plausibility is defined as the extent to which a claim seems to be true, given its relationship to what we and others take to be knowledge that is beyond reasonable doubt. That is a definition of plausibility. Credibility is whether the claim of a kind that, given what we know about the research was, about how the research was carried out, we can judge it to be very likely to be true. So that are the two requirements of triangulation. Steck in 1995, he gave protocols for triangulation as follows. Data source triangulation. The analysts or the researchers ask whether or not what they are reporting is likely to be constant at other times or circumstances. Investigator or researcher triangulation. Other researchers take a look at the same scene, or findings can be presented to other researchers to discuss alternative interpretations. And theory triangulation, multiple investigators or researchers agree as to the meaning of the phenomena being observed. Methodological triangulation, this involves using a variety of data collection methods to build confidence in the interpretations made. And member triangulation, the respondent is asked to review the material for accuracy and to add further comments that might aid description and explanation. By doing so, the actors or the respondents personally help triangulate the researcher's observations and interpretations. So these protocols should be considered in your research. Okay. Let's compare the interpretation as method between quantitative and qualitative research. In quantitative research, operationally binds the inquiry to be defined into variables or small numbers. So in quantitative research, the variables that we use are very specifically defined, specifically measured, and it involves objectivity, not much subjectivity involved in quantitative research. We have variables, we have items to measure the variables, and we have numbers representing the variables which we can analyze in quantitative research. And in quantitative research, it minimizes importance of interpretation until data are analyzed. So for example, in your chapter 4, data findings of research, not much interpretation, you just report without much interpretation and subjectivity. Period of data collection and statistical analysis thought of as value-free means it doesn't involve subjectivity. In qualitative research, it seeks unanticipated as well as expected relationships. For example, you go for interviews, observations. Sometimes the researcher finds unanticipated relationships or unanticipated findings. And dependent variables are experientially rather than operationally defined. In qualitative research, sometimes the researcher has a very little knowledge about the dependent variable. Blur is still blur about the dependent variable until he or she goes, collect the data and analyze. Then at that time, through experientially means through experience, through observations, then the researcher in qualitative research get more knowledge about the dependent variable. This is different in quantitative research, where in quantitative research, at the beginning of the research, the dependent variable was defined clearly operationally before collecting the data. In qualitative research, before collecting the data, the researcher was blur, kelabu, blur, had little knowledge about the dependent variable that he or she wanted to analyze. Only after gathering all the information, getting all the data, the researcher was more clear about the dependent variable. Even independent variables expected develop in unexpected ways. So in qualitative research, before collecting the data, the researcher didn't know how many independent variables. Not much knowledge. Maybe, for example, he or she expected to have, a few factors which explain a certain phenomena. Let's say he or she expected 4 or 5 factors, or we call independent variables. Then, after he or she collected the data using surveys or observations, he or she can come up with more independent variables. Okay. And in qualitative research, situational conditions are not known in advance. The researcher goes in with zero knowledge about the conditions, like I mentioned earlier about the Japanese lady. She didn't know anything about Malaysia. She didn't know anything about the pondok system, about the situations. She didn't know in advance. She only knew after she came. In qualitative research, findings are not so much findings as assertions. So in qualitative research, they think or they view that their findings are not findings like quantitative research, but rather more of an assertions, because it involves more subjectivity. Okay, penat lah. Okay, we are done with chapter 6. Okay, try to do this exercise. I will pick up some of the questions for final exam from this book. For example, discuss the strengths and weaknesses of using surveys, or discuss the strengths and weaknesses of using case studies or observations. Very easy questions. This is a more difficult question. For example, design a data collection form to allow observation. Okay, the technique is observation of workers' behavior in an open plan office. Okay, we are done with primary data collection. We go a little bit on secondary data collection. Secondary data is data collected by someone else, and there is a great deal available to you. You can get secondary data from books, libraries, on the web. Nowadays you don't have to go to libraries. You can use e-library or your Google. You can search even in Google or Google Scholar. Okay. You are very lucky. When I was young, I need to spend days in libraries to get certain data. Now I'm old. I don't have to go to library. I just can get data from my home. Okay, you are very lucky. I think I would have published more research if this type of technology were available. When during my younger days, it was very difficult to get secondary data. Sometimes I had to go to the statistics department and they said, no, we don't have that data. Penat. And then, we had to go around. Nowadays, you can buy data very cheap. Now you can get the international data on economics for $350. Data on economic variables for all countries in the world, right? From 1920s until 2020. Imagine how many data? Only $350. About a little bit more than 1,000. Okay. Any question on how to get secondary data? You know it better than I do, because to get secondary data, if you have e-library and you are rajin, play around with your e-library, you get many data. And some of the data can be purchased. If, for example, you want some data on SMEs, you can purchase from what do you call it? Lupa. Lupa. Tuan-tuan ni nyanyuk. You can purchase from, you can get data on SMEs and other types of business. You can pay to the, what do you call it? Oh, sorry, I forgot the name. So, however, there are some problems with secondary data, such as whether the data is valid because it was collected by someone else, right? And sometimes the problem is the definitions of variables in the data that are ambiguous. For example, the economics data, balance of payment, okay? Balance of payment. The definitions of balance of payment by different institutions are different, so that we are not very clear about the definition of certain variables. However, the advantages of using secondary data are that secondary data involves the large representative samples. You can get the data very cheap, okay? And good for examining longitudinal data and looking for trends. For example, if you subscribe to IFS, International Financial System, IFS, you pay $350, you will get data from 1920s until now. So that's a lot of data for all countries in the world. Just for example. Okay. And the third advantage is supporting documentation and explanation of methodology, sampling strategy. Data codes are given in certain secondary data. And the researcher can concentrate on data analysis and interpretation. The data are ready. No need to do PLS, no need to know. So you just input the data and use SPSS, for example, to analyze the trend. And of course, there are sophisticated techniques, sophisticated software such as eViews. So we will not cover on this one. I used to be an expert on CViews. Now I don't like it anymore. Okay. The disadvantages of secondary data are data compatibility. Sometimes the data that you get is not what you want. And data coverage, sometimes there are missing data and the data doesn't cover all the groups or all the periods or all the years that you want. Okay. So if you decide to use secondary data, then it is important to justify why you want to use secondary data or why secondary data is relevant to your research questions. It's important to understand how the data was collected, and it's important to put effort in the analysis because the data is ready. So you need to put effort in the analysis. You can use at master's level SPSS, at PhD level maybe you need eViews to get a more what do you call it? A more canggih, a more sophisticated analysis of the secondary data. Web search skills, okay. You can search the web to get information. Okay, this one, I think you are better than me. Okay, you can search the web to get the data. Okay, these are some of the websites. You can use Google, Yahoo, About, Lycos, Magellan, LookSmart, Open, Directory. So I think you are better than me. I'm an old man. All right. Okay, these are another link. So you can get data through many sources. And there's also advanced searching. All right, I will not go to this. Search engines. Okay, any question? If you go to doctoral support group, you can also ask for certain data. And those are PhD students in DSG, doctoral support group, they are more than willing to share the data if they have. Mr. Hamza, do you have doctoral support group in your country?
No, I don't have. We don't have.
I think, Cikgu Norma, can someone from outside join our DSG?
Sure, it's from Facebook, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in Facebook.
Facebook.
You can go and search
Yes.
DSG, Doctoral Support Group. It's very helpful.
Let me search now.
Yeah,
So,
doctoral support group.
support group.
Doctoral support group
Okay.
in Facebook. You can join. You can ask questions. They post lots of questions. Sometimes you can just watch what watch them, watch the questions, watch the answer. You can post your questions. Okay, inshallah, next time we will continue discussing some of the ways to collect data. Surveys is one of the methods to collect primary data. We will talk more about surveys in our next class, inshallah. All right. Any question for today? Don't forget to watch Dr. Yusuf TV
Okay.
and watch videos on Telegram. I think there are many useful videos that I post, I share on the Telegram. Watch the videos and continue writing. Don't leave one day without writing anything. Okay, at least one day you need to write something.
Okay, I'm writing, but I think I do a lot of mistakes, and I go back. I write, I delete. I thought it was more easy, but it's so tasking.
Okay.
Yes, but it's I enjoy the challenge, because you write and then you see that your objective was not relating to others, and then you go back.
Okay.
One day, one paragraph, Doctor,
One day, one paragraph at least.
at least.
Okay. So, Mr.
So can I
Hamza,
ask a
send to
question?
me whatever you
Yes.
have. Send to me. Don't worry, send to me.
Okay.
Uh, I would like
Sure.
to take a look at it.
Let me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So, doctor, I think there is a brother of mine who wanted to join our class. I was taking him through what we are studying with you, and he wants to join to apply and join. So he was asking if he's given an offer, will he be among our class, or he will? He wanted to be among our class.
okay, he's
So have we
welcome.
gone too far? He's welcome.
He can still join. Don't worry.
Okay.
He can still join, and if once he join, suppose he get a headache, then don't worry. Just that's part of the process.
Okay. Sure.
Of course, there are some things that you know he might not. He might have trouble understanding, and he might get a certain headache, but it's okay. It's a normal process of learning. So in this class, if you get headache after class, it's normal. If you don't get headache, then it's not normal. Okay. So he's welcome to join. You can once I post the link, then you can forward the link to him. It's welcome to join this class.
All right.
Okay. So I think any more question before we stop recording? I think I will stop recording now, but you can still ask questions later. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.